Butter is a kitchen essential used in most homemade meals and intercontinental cuisines. But have you ever stopped to think about how it's actually made? How does fresh milk transform into the golden goodness that melts perfectly on pancakes? Today we are going behind the scenes into a butter factory where massive machines churn, knead, and package butter on an enormous scale. Every process step is detailed and fascinating, from fresh dairy farms to supermarket shelves. Stay tuned, at the end are some fun and unexpected facts about butter. Now that we are here, let's get into it. Step 1. Ingredient sourcing. People always argue that butter is rich in protein instead of fat, which is what the majority believe. Well, maybe they are right. The reason is that butter processing starts with one ingredient, and that is fresh, high-quality milk. But not just any milk will do. Dairy factories get their milk from carefully selected farms, where cows are raised under strict conditions to ensure the best possible product. The milk quality gives the taste and texture of the butter, so farmers must follow specific feeding and care routines to produce milk rich in cream. Once the milk arrives at the factory, it undergoes a process called separation. Milk naturally contains fat, but to make butter, workers need to extract the wealthiest part, the cream. This is done using a machine called a centrifugal separator. It spins the milk at incredibly high speeds to force the heavier skim milk to separate from the lighter, fat-rich cream. The skim milk is then used for other dairy products like cheese or low-fat milk, while the cream moves forward in the butter-making process. It is essential to know that the fat content of the cream is important. For butter to have the right texture and flavor, the cream must contain at least 30 to 40% fat. The butter won't form properly if the fat content is too low. Also, if it's too high, it may become greasy instead of creamy. To ensure the right consistency, factories carefully test each batch to ensure it meets the ideal fat percentage before moving on to the next step. Sometimes, if you buy butter and notice that the taste and smell seem off, it could be that the factory has skipped this process. Anyway, the cream is still liquid at this stage, looking much like regular milk but with a thicker consistency. However, it won't stay that way for long. Isn't it amazing to think that all of this effort goes into just getting the right raw ingredients? You should also know that on average, it takes about 21 pounds of milk to make just 1 pound of butter. That is a lot of milk for a single stick of butter, don't you think? This is why dairy farms and factories work skillfully to ensure every drop of milk is put to good use. Step 2. Pasteurization. Pasteurization is the next step after high-quality milk is collected in the factory. This process ensures that the cream is healthy for consumption. If this step is skipped for one reason or the other, the consumer could come down with a serious illness arising from poor gut health. If you are wondering what pasteurization means, it is a heat treatment process that gets rid of unwanted bacteria and ensures that butter does not go bad before its expiry date. In a factory setting, large-scale pasteurization uses high-tech machines that heat the cream to a specific temperature for a set amount of time. The most common method is the high-temperature short time, known as the HTST process. This is where the cream is heated to around 161 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 seconds before being rapidly cooled. This kills bacteria while maintaining the fresh, creamy taste we all love in butter. The factory uses large stainless steel tanks called pasteurizers to heat and cool the cream carefully for this process. These machines have built-in temperature controls to ensure the cream reaches the exact heat level needed to destroy harmful microorganisms without overcooking it. In the process of making butter, if the temperature is not well regulated, the harmful bacteria might survive. On the flip side, the cream could develop an unpleasant taste if it's too high. So yes, precision is very important to getting it right. One of the biggest advantages of pasteurization is that it doesn't affect the cream's natural flavor or texture. It boosts the overall quality of butter by preventing spoilage and improving consistency. So now you are wondering what happens if a batch of butter is not pasteurized. Well, unpasteurized butter has a much shorter shelf life and is more prone to developing off flavors due to bacteria growth. That's why all commercial butter undergoes this process before it gets to the malls and grocery stores. Additionally, pasteurization is responsible for its smooth and buttery feel, which we all love. The heat treatment helps break down specific proteins in the cream. This is what makes it easier to churn later on. Without this step, the cream might not transform into butter as efficiently, which will then lead to a less desirable final product. After pasteurization, the cream is cooled rapidly and stored in large refrigerated tanks until it's ready for churning. This cooling process is just as necessary as heating because it keeps the cream fresh while allowing it to develop the right consistency. If the cream is left warm for too long, it could start to break down or create a sour taste. Now, who wants sour butter? No one. At this stage, some factories may also improve the fat content of the cream by regulating it slightly to meet their specific butter recipe. Different types of butter require different fat percentages, so this step ensures that the final product has the perfect balance of fat and moisture. With pasteurization complete, the cream is safe, pure, and ready for the next step, which is churning. Before we move on to the next step of making butter, let's hear from you. What's your favorite way to use butter, or you are the calorie-conscious type? Do you love it melted over popcorn, spread on a warm piece of bread, or whipped into creamy mashed potatoes? Hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Step 3. Churning. Back in the day, when herd farmers moved from one place to another with their milk in animal pouches, the milk separated into solid and liquid. That process was churning, but they had no way of knowing. Now, in the factory, after many years of trial and error, the art of churning is no longer where it used to be. In a nutshell, this is the moment when smooth, liquid cream transforms into the rich, golden butter we all know and love. It's a simple yet fascinating process that has been used for centuries, but it happens on a much larger and faster scale in factories. Simply, churning is all about force. When the cream is continuously beaten or whipped, the fat molecules begin to bind together, separating from the liquid. This separation is what creates solid butter and leaves behind buttermilk as a byproduct. It may sound like a straightforward process, but there's a delicate science behind it. In traditional butter making, people would use wooden churns, shaking or rotating the cream for an extended period until the fat solids formed. If you have ever tried making butter at home by shaking a jar of cream, you must have experienced a tiny version of what happens in a factory. While it works, it's slow and labor intensive. That's why large-scale butter production relies on high-speed industrial churning machines that can process massive amounts of cream in minutes instead of hours. In a factory, the cream is poured into huge churning machines that spin rapidly. These machines use rotating paddles or blades to create the same agitation as a traditional butter churn, but it operates at a much higher speed in this case. Within minutes, the fat begins to cluster by forming small butter granules. As the process continues, the clumps grow larger, and eventually they separate completely from the buttermilk. The butter looks like soft, grainy clumps floating in a milky liquid at this stage. It's not yet the smooth and creamy texture we are used to seeing in stores. To refine it further, the butter undergoes a kneading process inside the churn. This step helps squeeze out any remaining buttermilk while making the butter more even. The temperature during churning plays an important role in arriving at the texture of the final product. If the cream is too warm, the butter might become too soft and greasy. If it's too cold, it might be too hard to work with. That's why factories carefully control the churning temperature to ensure consistency. As the butter continues to be worked, the factory may also add ingredients depending on the type of butter being produced. For example, if salted butter is being made, precise amounts of salt are added and mixed in thoroughly during this stage. Some factories even produce flavored butter, such as garlic or herb-infused varieties, which are then mixed in before packaging. The butter is almost ready at this point, but it still needs to be shaped and packaged before it makes it to the stores. The buttermilk, which has been separated during the churning process, doesn't go to waste either. It's collected and used in baking, cooking, or even sold as a product. Step 4. Washing and kneading. You might think that once the butter has formed during churning, it is ready to be packaged. Well, not quite. This is because it still contains some leftover buttermilk and moisture, which must be removed to improve the texture and extend its shelf life. This is where the washing and kneading process comes in. It is an important step in making butter smooth, creamy, and perfect for spreading. In traditional butter making, butter would be washed by hand using cold water. This helped rinse away any remaining buttermilk, which if left behind could cause the butter to spoil faster. In modern factories, the process is much more efficient. The freshly churned butter is placed into industrial washing machines, where it is rinsed multiple times with purified water. These machines gently mix the butter with water, allowing residual buttermilk to separate and drain away. Washing also improves the butter's texture. Removing buttermilk ensures that the butter remains firm and doesn't develop an overly tangy taste. Not only that, it also helps the butter maintain a longer shelf life by reducing the risk of unwanted bacterial growth. The number of washes depends on the type of butter being produced. Some kinds of butter, like European-style varieties, may retain a slight amount of buttermilk for a richer taste, while others are thoroughly washed for a purer, cleaner flavor. Once the washing is complete, the butter moves on to the kneading stage. This is where it starts to take on the smooth, creamy texture we associate with high-quality butter. In traditional methods, butter would be kneaded by hand using wooden paddles, pressing out any remaining moisture while also softening the consistency. In factories, this is done with large automated kneading machines that press, fold, and work the butter until it reaches the perfect consistency. During kneading process, the butter's fat molecules are evenly distributed to make it more spreadable. If butter isn't adequately kneaded, it can end up grainy or uneven in texture. This step also ensures that any added ingredients, like salt for salted butter, are fully mixed in to create a uniform taste throughout. Another important factor in this stage is moisture control. While butter naturally contains a small amount of water, too much moisture can affect its quality. Excess water can make butter unstable, causing it to separate or become too soft. Factory machines carefully regulate the moisture content to ensure that each batch meets the exact standards required for commercial sale. Some factories also produce specialized butter at this stage. For example, whipped butter, which is lighter and fluffier than regular butter, is created by incorporating air during kneading. Flavored butter, like garlic or honey butter, has its extra ingredients blended in at this point to ensure even distribution. When the butter has been thoroughly washed and kneaded, it is nearly ready for packaging. The texture is smooth, the moisture content is just right, and any added ingredients are perfectly blended. This step ensures that the butter you buy in the store is consistently delicious, whether using it for baking, cooking, or spreading on warm toast. Step 5. Adding salt and flavor variations. Once the butter has been kneaded to a smooth, creamy consistency, it's time to add the final touch, which is salt and flavor variations. This step does not only enhances the taste, but also plays a role in preserving the butter. While some people prefer the pure taste of unsalted butter, many enjoy the rich, savory notes that salt brings. But salt isn't the only ingredient that can be added. Factories also create specialty butter infused with herbs, garlic, honey, and even exotic spices. I bet you didn't know this. The difference between salted and unsalted butter comes down to personal preference and use. Unsalted butter is often favored by bakers because it gives them complete control over the salt content in their recipes. It's also preferred by those who enjoy the natural sweetness of fresh butter. Salted butter, on the other hand, has a longer shelf life because salt acts as a natural preservative. The amount of salt added varies by brand, but it typically ranges from 1 to 2% of the total weight of the butter. In factories, salt is added using large mixing machines to ensure even distribution. The butter is churned with fine salt granules until the entire batch has a consistent taste. The mixing process is carefully controlled so the texture remains smooth and creamy. If the salt isn't blended correctly, the butter could end up with uneven salt pockets, which could be overpowering in some bites and barely noticeable in others. Beyond traditional salted butter, many factories produce specialty flavored kinds of butter that cater to different tastes. Perhaps you didn't know that garlic butter is one of the most popular variations, which is often used for cooking and spreading on bread. To make it, finely minced garlic or garlic powder is blended into the butter during the mixing stage. Sometimes parsley or other herbs are added for extra flavor. Herb-infused butter, which can include rosemary, thyme, or chives, is also common and is perfect for spreading on steaks or vegetables. Sweet variations of butter are also gaining popularity. Honey butter, for example, is made by mixing in high-quality honey for a slightly sweet and creamy spread. Some brands even experiment with unique flavors like cinnamon butter, truffle butter, or even spicy chili butter. These specialty butters are carefully crafted to maintain the perfect balance between the butter's natural richness and the added flavors. Step 6. Packaging and distribution. Once the butter has been perfectly churned, kneaded, and flavored, it's time for the final step, the packaging and distribution. This is where the creamy goodness gets molded into different shapes, sealed for freshness, and prepared for shipment to grocery stores and markets worldwide. Butter comes in many forms like traditional sticks, blocks, and whipped varieties stored in tubs. The molding process begins with machines that portion out the butter into precise weights to ensure consistency in every package. For stick butter, the softened butter is pushed through a shaping machine that forms it into long rectangular bars. These bars are then sliced into individual sticks before they are wrapped in parchment paper or foil. The wrapping is essential not only for branding, but also to protect the butter from absorbing unwanted odors and moisture. For block butter, the process is similar but on a larger scale. The butter is formed into big rectangular slabs that weigh a pound or more and then cut into smaller portions. These blocks are typically used in food service, bakeries, and restaurants where large quantities of butter are needed. Some specialty butters, especially artisanal varieties, are hand molded into decorative shapes or rolled into logs before being wrapped. Whipped butter, which has a lighter texture due to the incorporation of air, is packaged in tubs. Machines inject air into the butter as it's churned to create a spreadable consistency that is perfect for easy spreading. The whipped butter is then piped into containers and sealed with airtight lids to maintain its texture and prevent spoilage. One of the most crucial parts of butter packaging is ensuring freshness. Since butter is a dairy product, it must be protected from air, light, and heat to maintain its quality. Factories use specialized wrapping materials such as foil-lined paper or plastic to prevent oxidation and preserve the butter's flavor. Some high-end butters even come in vacuum-sealed packaging for extended shelf life. Once the butter is securely packaged, it's time for storage and transportation. Butter is stored in refrigerated warehouses where temperature and humidity are carefully controlled. This is essential because butter can spoil or develop odd flavors if exposed to warm temperatures for too long. In most factories, the storage rooms are kept at a consistent temperature of around 35 degrees Fahrenheit to keep the butter firm and fresh until it's ready to be shipped. Transportation is another critical part of the process. Since butter needs to remain cold, it's transported in refrigerated trucks or containers, often called reefer trucks. These trucks ensure that the butter stays at the right temperature during transit, whether shipped across the country or exported overseas. In some cases, butter is transported in bulk before being packaged at regional distribution centers closer to its final destination. Butter brands also have to consider international regulations when shipping their products. This is because different countries have varying standards for dairy imports, and butter must meet strict quality and food safety guidelines. Some regions require additional testing or special labeling before butter can be sold in their markets. Finally, after passing through factories, storage facilities, and refrigerated trucks, the butter arrives at grocery stores and markets, where consumers cannot wait to grab it for different kinds of cooking and baking. Butter has been around for thousands of years, and it all started with a happy accident. For a moment, imagine early farmers storing milk in animal skins and then carrying it around while traveling. The constant movement caused the milk fat to separate to form a creamy, rich substance. Yes, that's what we now call butter. The earliest known butter making goes back about 8,000 years, with civilizations like the Mesopotamians, Egyptians, and even the Vikings churning milk into butter using simple tools. Back then, people used wooden barrels, clay pots, or animal stomachs to shake or roll the milk until butter formed. It was a slow process, but the result was worth it. Butter quickly became a staple food that was prized for its taste, texture, and ability to store longer than fresh milk. In medieval Europe, butter became even more popular, especially in colder regions where dairy farming flourished. Some places even treated butter as a luxury, with the best batches reserved for the wealthy folks. Guess what? Butter served more than just food. In those days, people used butter for medicine, skincare, and even as a form of payment in trade. One of the most fascinating butter discoveries happened in Ireland, where archaeologists found ancient butter buried deep in a bog. At the time of discovery, the bog butter had been stored for over 2,000 years, and it was shockingly still perfectly preserved. Some brave food experts even tasted it. The only thing was that it wasn't as smooth as what you would spread on toast today. For most of history, butter making was a hands-on, time-consuming process. Farmers and families stirred it by hand, but it took hours to produce a small amount. However, everything changed in the 19th century with industrialization. New inventions like mechanical butter churns and pasteurization allowed factories to mass-produce butter safely and efficiently. This way, it meant butter was no longer just for farmers. It was available to everyone. Today, butter factories use high-tech machines that can produce thousands of pounds of butter in a single day. The process has become incredibly precise, ensuring every batch has the perfect creamy texture and rich taste. Despite all these advancements, butter remains just as essential as ever. Whether it's spread on a warm slice of bread, melted over popcorn, or mixed into cookie dough, butter will always bring flavor and richness to kitchens worldwide. Believe it or not, some types of butter sell for hundreds of dollars per pound. The most expensive butter in the world is Étiré butter from France, known for its silky texture and rich flavor. It's produced using traditional wooden churns, which gives it a unique consistency that chefs highly prize. Because of its high quality and limited production, Étiré butter can cost up to $50 per pound. Another luxurious butter comes from Jersey cows in the United Kingdom. This milk is naturally high in butter fat, which makes the butter incredibly rich and creamy. Some small batch butter made from Jersey cow milk can cost even more due to their limited availability. Then there's yak butter from Tibet, a prized ingredient in traditional Tibetan tea. This butter, made from the milk of yaks that graze at high altitudes, has a distinct taste and is often used in ceremonies and religious rituals. While it's not commonly sold worldwide, rare exports of top quality Tibetan yak butter can fetch extreme prices. If you thought butter was just for eating, think again. Butter sculpting is a popular tradition in several countries, with artists creating stunning, detailed sculptures entirely out of butter. The largest butter sculpture ever recorded was made at the 2019 Pennsylvania Farm Show, where a team of artists crafted a 1,200-pound butter display featuring a life-sized cow, a young farmer, and dairy-themed elements. In the United States, butter sculptures are a massive attraction at state fairs, particularly in Iowa, Minnesota, and Ohio, where life-sized butter cows are displayed yearly. These sculptures are stored in refrigerated glass cases and take days, sometimes weeks, to complete. India also has its butter sculpting tradition, particularly in Buddhist monasteries in Ladakh and Tibet. Monks create delicate butter sculptures called tormas, which are used in religious ceremonies and festivals. These sculptures can be incredibly detailed and feature elaborate designs, bright colors, and symbolic elements representing spiritual beliefs. Butter is used in more than just food. It is also a part of some strange and fascinating traditions around the world. In Scotland, there was an old superstition that burying butter in the ground would bring good luck and protect a family's dairy supply. This is why archaeologists have found 2,000-year-old butter buried in Irish bogs. People have asked questions and made speculations on how it got there. The most plausible reason is that it was likely left there for safekeeping or as part of ancient rituals. Some of this bog butter has even been found preserved well enough to still be edible, even though only a few have been brave enough to taste them. In Norway and Sweden, a butter knife is traditionally placed in the center of a butter dish during meals. This supposedly brings harmony to the household and prevents arguments. Some families even have dedicated butter knives that are never used for anything else. One of the strangest butter traditions comes from Nepal, where butter lamps are used in Buddhist temples. These lamps are made by filling small bowls with yak butter and inserting a wick. Monks light these lamps as offerings to deities, and some temples have thousands of butter lamps burning at once. This tradition has been practiced for centuries and is believed to bring peace, wisdom, and enlightenment. You probably have not heard this one. Did you know that astronauts have taken butter into space? While traditional butter doesn't last long in zero gravity, NASA has experimented with freeze-dried butter powder that can be rehydrated in space. Butter is also used in space food recipes to improve texture and flavor, especially in dishes designed to be eaten during long missions. When you visit your local grocery store to buy your favorite brand of butter, you should know that behind every stick of butter on a grocery store shelf is a team of dedicated factory workers who ensure the production process runs smoothly. While machines handle much of the heavy work, human oversight is essential to maintain quality, hygiene, and efficiency. These workers operate equipment, inspect ingredients, monitor production, and package the final product. Their combined efforts are what help transform raw milk into creamy, delicious butter that meets strict industry standards. By now, you must know that the process starts when fresh milk and cream arrive from dairy farms. After that, factory workers at the receiving station inspect each delivery for quality by checking factors like temperature, fat content, and freshness. They collect samples to test for bacteria or impurities to ensure that only the best dairy products are used. If a batch fails to meet the required standards, it is rejected before it enters production. During pasteurization, workers work hard to monitor large stainless steel tanks where the cream is heated to specific temperatures. They adjust settings as needed and ensure that every batch is processed safely. Without this step, butter could spoil quickly or contain harmful bacteria. They check consistency to adjust mixing speeds, and sometimes manually sample batches to confirm the right texture. Modern factories use continuous butter-making machines, but workers are still needed to supervise operations and troubleshoot any issues. After churning, the butter goes through a kneading process, where excess moisture is removed to improve texture. Workers also operate kneading machines to ensure the butter is smooth and evenly mixed. If the recipe demands salted butter or special flavors like garlic or honey butter, workers add precise ingredients at this stage. They must carefully measure and mix flavors to maintain consistency across all batches. Throughout the production process, factory workers conduct regular quality checks. They take butter samples to test its fat content, moisture levels, and taste. If any batch falls short of quality standards, adjustments must be made before packaging. These workers ensure that every product meets safety regulations and customer expectations. Once the butter is ready, it moves to the packaging stage. Finally, workers ensure that machines shape the butter into sticks, blocks, or tubs. They ensure each package is sealed correctly to maintain freshness. Some workers manually check for defects, while others help load finished products onto pallets for transportation. So there you have it. The next time you eat butter, take a moment to appreciate the hard work that goes into its manufacture. Now that you know the step-by-step process of butter making, could you try a homemade butter for the next family Thanksgiving? Also, which of the steps would be easier to try? Let's know in the comments. If you enjoy this video, don't hesitate to like, share, and subscribe to this channel.